Enjoy early access to ad-free episodes each week when you subscribe to Wedding Planning Podcast Premium in Apple Podcasts. Enjoy the show.
Yep, I know. I literally heard your voice 100 times in my head. The whole process, I'm just like, do what Cara says, keep it simple. And it worked.
Today on the Wedding Planning Podcast, you'll hear from Samantha, who's a September 2024 bride, and she got married at a state park in New York in a gorgeous wedding weekend that featured no cell phone service, just 6 electrical outlets, and a hot air balloon send-off for the new bride and groom. The Wedding Planning Podcast is approaching our 10-year anniversary this winter, which is almost impossible for me to wrap my mind around. When I started this project, my son was an infant, my daughter wasn't even in preschool yet, Obama was our president, and TikTok didn't even exist, thankfully. It literally feels like a lifetime ago. This project has brought me so much fulfillment and so much joy. And if I'm being completely honest with you, there have been some times over the past 10 years that I've wondered if it's run its course and it might be time to move on to a new topic or a new project. But what keeps me hooked on the Wedding Planning Podcast is exactly what Samantha is here to share with you today. And it's what a magical, life-changing experience a wedding can really be. And I'm just so passionate about highlighting what's really possible for you and your partner, regardless of your budget or any of your circumstances. A meaningful and beautiful wedding can have a $2,000 price tag or a $100,000 price tag. And I just love pulling back the curtain to the creative ways that you can maximize what you have available and really focus on the things that truly matter. And doing that while tuning out the noise and the overwhelm and the excess and just the complete craziness of the wedding industry that you see so often on social media, in the news, on the internet. I am still so obsessed with these ideas 10 years later, and I just want as many couples as possible to maximize the opportunity that you have at your fingertips to create an unforgettable wedding experience and to create this really special gateway into the rest of your lives. I got married in 2010, and our wedding changed my life in some very obvious ways, but also in some very unexpected and not so obvious ways. Planning our wedding was the genesis of a business idea that eventually led me to leaving a corporate banking job so that I could be fully present to raising our 2 children. That is a very long story in a teeny tiny nutshell. There's much more details to that, and I can share that another time. But to tie it all together for today, Samantha is also in the beginnings of a very similar journey. She's pursuing a passion that she uncovered originally through planning her own wedding and listening to the Wedding Planning Podcast, and she is now actively pursuing that as a business venture as well. But I am jumping ahead. We're going to start at the beginning. Here's Samantha with the details of her September 2024 wedding weekend celebration. She's going to share the good, the challenges, the things she would do differently, and the things she wouldn't change for the world. To view her beautiful wedding photos and a full recap of today's show, you can visit weddingplanningpodcast.co/Samantha. And with that, I'll let her tell you the full story.
Hi, I'm Samantha, and my husband's name is Sean. We live in the Finger Lakes region of New York, and we got married just about an hour away at Letchworth State Park on September 21st. We ended up doing a wedding weekend, so we had a welcome party Friday, the actual wedding Saturday, of course, and then Sunday morning we did a hot air balloon send off, which was like at the crack of dawn. It was super early. Come to find out, you have to either fly like early in the morning or in the evening when the wind is the lowest. So that was a bit of a struggle for people to wake up and attend, but we did it. It was so much fun. Entire wedding was fairly non-traditional from the start. It was a pagan ceremony, And we didn't do a bridal party, which I have no regrets about. Of course, all my girlfriends were there and a part of my special day in all the ways. But yeah, we kind of kept it simple in that regard. And then we didn't even officially get engaged until just 4 months before the wedding. We had been low key planning the wedding since last September. So we did have about a full year of wedding planning. But, as far as everyone else was concerned, we got engaged about like May this past year. So yeah, it was a fairly short planning period, but I did it. I would have gladly taken a couple years to do so, and we probably should have stretched it out, but honestly, we were just ready to get to it. We just bought a house last summer, and we knew we just wanted to start a family together, and yeah, we were just ready.
Can you tell us a little bit about the pacing of that 4-month planning period? I know you said you had kind of started mentally planning a little bit about a year ago, but how did those 4 months look? Like, what was the pace of your decision making and how did things unfold during that time?
Yeah. So, well, like I said, I really started last fall. It was just kind of like we didn't have the ring for quite a while because we had a custom made. So as far as like everyone else was concerned, May was really when we were officially engaged, but we had been planning well before that. So, last September we were just, we would drive around and try and figure out a venue. I really wish I had listened to your episode beforehand about choosing like a venue that does a lot of the stuff for you. Because like I said, we did it at a state park, which was beautiful and I have no regrets. But yeah, it would have been a lot less stressful if we had somebody to like do the chairs and everything. Yeah, I mean, it's you're literally bringing in everything when you're choosing a state park. It was appealing at first because it's like $100 to rent the pavilion, like that's crazy cheap. So I'm like, yeah, let's go for it. Let's save some money. But then, you got to take into account the chairs, the table rentals, if you're getting any extra tables, um, like all the decor. I mean, I thrifted all the decor for like a year. A lot of the stuff too, I just used from my house, like stuff I already had. So that was kind of convenient. We had to figure out what caterer would come there. The biggest challenge was not having cell phone service at the park. So yeah, yep. An insane decision. I really put a lot of my focus into the wedding website, which I used with Joy, and it was fairly simple through that, but I spent, like, just days putting out everything that any guest would need to know there, and that way there was no confusion when it came time to be in a park with no cell phone service. But, of course, people still got lost and kind of forgot a lot of the stuff that was on the website, so wouldn't recommend that. But, yeah, so it was just pulling together pretty much all my vendors was the biggest thing, and, with the pavilion that we had, there was only 6 outlets. So, considering that, especially with a wedding band, was a challenge, but we made it work. And then this state park that we chose is actually, like, one of the top state parks in America, if not number 1. I think it's been voted before. So, it books up very, really in advance. So some of the challenges that we encountered were, like, having enough places for people to stay. We tried to book some cabins ahead of time for them, and then they would just, like, pay us if they decided to stay there. But, really just lodging was a huge issue. But we made it work and people found places to stay. So it all came together.
The fact that you did this with no cell phone service and 6 electrical outlets is pretty amazing. So kudos for that.
Yeah, yeah, no
Yeah.
doubt. A lot of candles.
That works. Susan's Travel Services is so excited to partner with you to plan your honeymoon, destination wedding, or maybe even your bachelor or bachelorette party. Susan and her team have been planning dream vacations for 27 years, and they are truly the best in the business for start to finish planning services. Travel and new experiences are incredibly special to me, and Susan and her team have helped me plan some unforgettable vacations, including a bachelorette party in Cabo and a family anniversary celebration in Cancun. They meticulously researched the best all inclusive options for us based on some very specific priorities, and the professional assistance in choosing location, resort, activities, and transportation was absolutely priceless. From all inclusive resorts in Mexico and the Caribbean, overwater bungalows in the Maldives, or that African safari that you've always dreamed of, save yourself hours of research and guesswork and let Susan and her team find you the best options for a once in a lifetime vacation. Reach out to Susan and her team today by emailing info@susanstravelservices.com. And be sure to let her know that I sent you and get $50 off your final booking or $200 off your destination wedding. Her email one more time is info@susanstravelservices.com.
Yeah.
What about your staffing? Like, how did you do staffing for dinner, for things like that? Was that included with your catering package?
Yeah, it was. So, yeah, the catering, that price factor shocked me a little. They had to like bring everything in and use like what are those little things called that heat like the food, the little candles, those things. So, with no electricity, that was a challenge, but they really didn't give me any pushback. They were so helpful. I would recommend this catering company 100 times over. We just went the buffet style. So there wasn't a ton that they had to do serving wise. It was just setting everything up and then like changing things over from like the hors d'oeuvres to the main meal. There were a couple hiccups, such as like making sure the vendors got their meals. Just, little communication bits that I should have put more stuff on paper since we weren't going to have service and whatnot. But they came in. It sounds like they had done an event at that space before, or at least at Letchworth State Park. And they were from around there. So they were familiar with the area, probably have worked with no service before if, they've done an event there. They were really professional and they crushed it.
What about the other vendors? Everything else goes smoothly with photographer? I think you said you had a band or music.
The photographer is a friend of mine, so she was great. We've, known each other for quite some time, so that was nice. Just because I felt like I could talk to her at any time. That was another thing with my caterer, actually. He was like, I could text him in the middle of the night and he would give me like no pushback, answering my questions, whenever he was able to. But that was huge, was being able to just talk to vendors when things would pop in my head, because it's like I don't have time to wait till Monday or like the next day. It's like I have a question, I need it answered as soon as possible because my mind's already on to the next thing at this point in the planning. So yeah, between my photographer that I could talk to at like any time, the caterer who was great, and then the band. Actually, the band was probably the only spot I ran into a little bit of a hiccup. Come to find out, they don't really like you to pick their set list, which I spent days, weeks really doing. I planned the whole thing out because we're big music people. We love to go see a lot of live music. And so music was important to me. I didn't just want a DJ, I wanted a band. And, since we were doing a September 21st wedding, we wanted that September song, which has the horn section. So we even paid extra for the horn section. So it was like a 7-piece band. It was just when they had been communicating with me about, what information they needed, picking the songs. I was actually in Scotland, and so I missed some emails. And it wasn't until like the 2 weeks before the wedding that we were communicating more about it. And I was like, okay, here's my set list. And they're like, oh, that's actually not how we do things. And I'm like, oh. Well, can you do them, please? And so they ended up still doing it for me, and it went well, and everyone loved the music, so that was great. And we paid a little extra to have them do the ceremony music as well. When we were picking a band, we decided to go with a professional wedding band just because, they know how to work the crowd. We had thought about like a band that we like, that doesn't really typically do weddings. But when I was thinking about it, I was like, no, I want someone who just like knows what they're doing, especially with no service, And they crushed it. They were amazing. Everyone just kept raving about the band.
I'm glad they were flexible. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned a really good point when you were communicating back and forth with your vendors. It's so important to keep your questions organized and get it out of your head the minute you think about it, because otherwise it just goes. It flies right in and out. I do that all the time in just normal life, but
Yeah. Yep.
especially with wedding, there's so many things going on and so much organization that you're just not used to managing in daily, unless you're an event planner, which
Right. And now I feel like I am.
yeah,
I'm
exactly.
like, oh my gosh, I'm like a pro on Google Sheets and like just doing all the things. And honestly, I am not that organized of a person when it comes to like, paperwork and all that. But this year I was just like, I am doing this. I have to be organized if I want this to like go off without a hitch or, obviously that's not possible, but minimal, problems. Yeah, I just had like three different notebooks and just would write everything down the second I thought it. And, like I said, I would just text my vendors, put it in a Google Doc, would put it in Google Sheets, and that was key for sure.
Yeah, and everyone has their own special way of organizing. So whatever works for you. There's not one magical app or book or planner or website that can do it for you. Everyone is so different.
I didn't want to have any standard wedding. Like, that's just who I am. I want to do things different always. And I have a lot of really amazing friends. I would say if I was to have a bridal party, it would have been like eight of my closest girlfriends, and like my sister, and that's just, I don't know. To me, that's a lot. Something else that I've always thought is I just never wanted to put a lot of pressure on people for my wedding. Like, I didn't want them to have to do all this stuff, buy a dress, do all the things. So, really, what I did was just give them the option. I told my best girlfriends, I was like, if I was going to have a bridal party, you guys would be it. So if you want to get your hair done and stuff, so we're all at the house doing it the day of, you're more than welcome. And some did, some didn't. Um, and then, I kind of gave them a loose dress code, just that was like earth tones, minimal patterns, because I did want some pictures with my girlfriends after the wedding. And they all understood the assignment. They all looked beautiful. And we did end up doing a bachelorette party, and that was really fun and really nice. So, I felt like I was able to have a bridal party without actually having to do like all the extra organizing and all the communication and, avoid any, bad feelings about like the demands of being a bridesmaid and the cost. And, as someone who's been a bridesmaid, it can add up and it can be a little overwhelming. So yeah, I just wanted to be fairly easygoing about that and it worked out.
Good for you guys for making a decision that worked for you and just sticking with it. That eliminates so much of back and forth and coordinating with people. And like you said, there's so much expense related too. Expense, travel, time, back and forth, making sometimes it's almost as much of a mental drain, like trying to create things for people to do for you. And
Yeah.
sometimes we have all of our family and friends asking us to help and what can we do and what can we do? And sometimes it's easier just like one less thing for you to manage and delegate and handle if that's all gone and just kind of put on mute.
Yeah, 1,000%. I've said that 100 times, and everyone's like, "How can I help? How can I help?" And I'm just like, "Actually, you asking how to help is another task for me because then I have to, come up with the task and write it down, and it's just better if I just keep it all up here,
Yes.
in my head." So,
Yep. Keep it simple. My
yeah.
motto.
Yep, I know. I literally like heard your voice 100 times in my head. The whole process, I'm just like, do what Cara says, keep it simple. And it worked. And I'm not a simple person by any means, so it was actually harder said than done to do so. But when it came to certain things like the party favors or the flowers, I did try to keep it as simple as I could, and I'm glad I did.
It takes a lot of discipline. It's no joke.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt.
Can you also walk us through, again, something we kind of glossed over quickly at the beginning? You did this long weekend full of multiple days. Can you kind of walk us through the flow of that, starting at the beginning?
It started Friday, so we were supposed to have a rehearsal. Unfortunately, honestly, Friday was a flop. It was a total disaster. I kind of wish I didn't do it at all. It was gonna be like this welcome party after the rehearsal, which everyone could come to. I wanted to do that because, we had people coming from out of town. So I just thought it'd be nice to like feed them and get to see everybody just to maximize time spent. But it was, like I said, just a total disaster. It ended up being set up in the wrong location, which, if we had service, we could have just been like, all right, go to this location instead. But, we didn't. So everything had to be moved at the absolute last minute. Just everything was behind. My mom got lost for like 3 hours. So that was stressful. I think people still had a good time. We did wood fire pizzas. My dad has this portable smoker that's also a pizza oven on the back. So he pulled that up and he did some pizzas, he did wings, cooked right there in the wood fire oven. And then I put together a s'mores bar. So that was fun because in the shelter there, which is made of all stone. There was also a fireplace, so it was really cute. So we set that up, and everyone just kind of chilled and has like light drinks. I just got like light beer and like seltzers, and was like BYOB if you want anything else. So it was fairly chill for the guests, stressful for me, chill for them. And then, I didn't get any sleep at all that night. I think I really honestly slept like an hour. So that was kind of rough. But the next day we had the wedding and I decided last minute to do a first look. So I'm really glad I did that because it just kind of brought me back to earth and the reason I was doing it all. So we did that, and we had a fairly early ceremony, I would say. So we did the first look at like 2:30. Ceremony was at 3:15. And actually, while we were doing our first look, I had a pre-ceremony cocktail hour. So we had two cocktail hours. I don't know that people do that, but I was like, I just want to give people a moment to get to the location. If they're having trouble finding it, it gives them a little buffer space between the wedding or the pre-ceremony and the actual ceremony. So yeah, I think that was actually a good move because people did end up rolling in just at the last minute too. But most people were able to get there, have a light drink, and then they went to the ceremony. So from there, that was I think it was probably about 30 minutes, fairly short, but really meaningful and beautiful. And then we had the actual cocktail hour, which was at a different location, but it was just like a 2-minute drive or like a 5-minute walk. So then we had a nice long reception. I kept Googling. I'm like, is 6 hours too long for a wedding reception? But it was perfect. We did have to be out of the venue by 10 p.m. Oddly, it wasn't like strictly enforced, so it went a little longer. But yeah, everyone kind of dispersed on their own. I think it was by starting earlier in the day, they were kind of ready to roll out around 10 anyway. And then at 6:30, 7 a.m., we did the send off at the hot air balloon the next day.
So great. I love your celebration. I love the way you did everything so simple, but it was so unique and so meaningful to the two of you.
Thanks.
You did a really good job of making me feel like I know the two of you by looking at your pictures and talking for 20 minutes.
Oh, I love that. Honestly, the ceremony was my favorite part. It was just magical. It was raining right before and the sun cleared up. The sun came out like right when I was walking down the aisle. And I've just heard so many times how it was the best ceremony people have ever been to, the best vows they've ever heard, the best wedding they've been to in general. And I'm still hearing it, and it feels really good to see that all my efforts meant something and they really turned out.
What are 2 to 3 things that you would go back and do differently if you could have, like, a time machine?
Oh yeah. Sleep. Sleep is my number one. I would have taken a sleep aid, honestly, because I'm just like, I was so stressed and like high energy for everything that even if I took like general melatonin, it wouldn't have done the trick. And it didn't because I did, and it didn't work. But yeah, sleep would have been great. And then I probably definitely would have chosen a spot with self-service and then getting a place that is like a package deal. Quite honestly, I really wouldn't have done anything differently as far as those two things go, just because I am who I am and I wanted my wedding at Letchworth State Park. And if there's no service, then that's is what it is. People got to figure it out. So it all worked out, and I'm glad we did it where we did.
And that makes it even more unique and always a story that everyone will remember. Like you
Oh
said,
yeah.
people remember things for a reason, and that's such a unique, quirky, gutsy thing for you guys to do. And the payoff is that it's unforgettable. So that's the goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's nice for people to get to disconnect and to be in nature too. It just kind of like gives it more of a low key, less stuffy wedding vibe. I didn't want like the general white tent and like everything, how you typically would see it. I put a lot of effort into every little detail, from doing my own graphic design to thrifting literally every piece of decor that I had. It was a lot, but I did it. Honestly, I found skills that I didn't even know I had. And it's been really eye-opening.
Yeah,
Um,
so tell us about the flower experience. Outline that for
yeah,
me.
I was trying to keep it simple, as Cara says. And I was like, I know a lot of flower people. I'm a plant person. I worked at a greenhouse for a while, and I was like, well, I'll just have my friend Val grow my cut flowers. And because she already does that. So we made a plan and we were talking, and she's like, well, September, you really got dahlias. That's the big flower then. And she connected me with somebody who has a ton of dahlia tubers. She's like part of this dahlia society that I used to work with as well. And she was like, we're not going to grow the dahlias, but you can. And so I did. I just got a ton of dahlia tubers and I started growing the flowers. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to keep it at this. But of course, I didn't. And I just kept getting more and more flowers until eventually I was like, you know what? I think I planted too much. I'm just going to do this myself. I think I maybe gotten the idea from you to do bud vases. So I was like, I'll keep it simple with the bud vases, which now, as a developing forest, I realize isn't as simple as you might think. But yeah, I ended up just doing all my own flowers. I did my flowers for my bridal shower. I actually initially was just planning on doing like a flower farm. I was like, doing it all. And I was like, wow, I'm really good at this. And I kind of hate nursing, quite honestly. Ready to do something else. I've been a caregiver for like 12 years in some fashion, and this gives me joy. And so I started, like I said, growing them. And then I went to Scotland for a wedding in July. My husband's sister was getting married there, and I was just so inspired by all the beautiful arrangements and the floral design that I was like, hmm, I want to try floral design too. Might as well. I'm having a wedding, I'm having a bridal shower. Let's just give it a try. And I did. And like, really, I just tried like two times maybe. And I was like, oh my God, I'm actually really good at this. And I would share, on my Instagram, and people are just like, wow, like this is something that you're meant to do. And I couldn't agree more. So I was just kind of like not in a good place in my job at the time. And it really just set me up to be like, you know what? I actually want to change my career entirely and do something that brings me joy, and that can bring others joy as well. So I just I just did it. And yeah, that's the biggest thing I'm trying to do right now. I mean, at this point, it was like I wasn't gonna take on any events or any jobs before my wedding. So it's like there's no way I could possibly do that right now. And now it's October, so we're about to have our first frost. So flowers are on their way out. So at this point, I'm really just focusing on learning the business side of things, and advertising and doing my website, and yeah, trying to get my name out there before 2025 when hopefully brides are ready to book me for their next event.
Oh, good for you. That is so cool. That's we won't get into it now, but it's very similar to how I started doing wedding stuff. Holy, 14 years ago. Um,
Oh,
I got
wow.
I got married and we had our first daughter, and I had kind of been building a business in the background. I used to be a corporate banker, like talk about a
Oh my
career that I
gosh.
was not passionate about. And as soon as our daughter was born, I talked to my husband. We had had many conversations, but I was like, I don't want to pay someone else to raise our daughter while I'm doing a job I don't even enjoy. That's so silly to me.
Exactly. I had the exact same thought. That was the other thing. It's like, considering a family and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Good for you. Well, keep chasing that. Don't, I mean, I'll send you a few business resources that I found very, very helpful. Granted, it's a completely different niche within the wedding world, but I'll
Yeah.
send you
Yeah,
some
well, I
podcasts
appreciate
that
that.
were really helpful to me as I was getting started.
Oh, I would love that. Yeah, thank
Cool.
you.
And then if we have just a couple minutes left, if you wouldn't mind sharing, and you can do as many as you want, just some of the episodes that were really, really helpful to you. I'm always curious to know because different things resonate with different people, but if you could just share some of the shows that you found really helpful and maybe why so, I would love to hear.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, it was everything really. Certainly the DIY flowers and centerpieces, which led me into, doing my own thing. But the Q&As were always really helpful because I felt like it was just, like I said, I do it on my way to work and it was just like boom, boom, boom. Here's the questions everybody's wondering, um, and here's the quick answer. So that was nice. And then literally just any episode in which you discuss like doing what's best for us, and just making our wedding unique to us and how to have the hard conversations because that was definitely one of the hardest parts. I mean, with family and keeping the guest list low. Um, but I just felt like you really empowered me to do just what we wanted, and what worked for us. And it wasn't always easy, but we came out the other side. And then definitely, I don't know which one it was, but there was an episode in which you mentioned briefly to not forget about the ceremony. And that just really stuck with me because so many people put all this effort into the reception and completely forget about the ceremony until it's last minute. But the vow writing episode with the vow whisperer was helpful. And it was shortly after listening to that I just started writing down every vow tidbit that I thought of in my phone notes. And yeah, it just ended up being so beautiful because all the work I put into it, from the decor, to the music, which I would strongly suggest putting a lot of effort into because it just really, changes the vibe. And then to the vows, it was just perfect. And we also incorporated hand fasting, which was fun, and it made the ceremony a little different. And then the vow writing in general, that episode that kind of prompted me to start it was great because it was like in the last 6 weeks or so when things were just crazy, I would just be like, okay, I need to write my vows, or I need to work on it, need to finalize them. And then when I would do so, it was just so grounding. Because of course there are 100 times where I'm like, we should have just eloped. But when I would sit down and write my vows, it's like, oh yeah, this is why I love this person. This is why we're doing this. And our love is special and deserves to be shared. So yeah, it was so nice to just like really sit into that and be reminded that the vows, the ceremony is one of the most important parts of the whole thing.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for taking a half hour out of your day to share everything. I really, really appreciate it. Your email, I will never forget your email.
Oh,
It was so sweet. I love,
oh well, I appreciate you so much,
oh, good.
really.
Thank you. Thank you. You would be surprised by how shy people are about reaching out and sending those, like, just those simple emails. So it means a
Yeah,
lot to me. And thank you. Thank you for
of
sharing.
course.
Really,
Oh, well,
really
thank
happy.
you. Yeah,
Happy to
I'm
hear
so
that
glad.
everything worked out and happy to hear that it was helpful to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you a million times over.